All right, everybody, good morning. I am Gregory Youngblood. I'm responsible for product marketing at Netomi, and I am very happy to have everybody on board for today's live chat. I'm particularly excited about this conversation because we are going to take a fresh look at what is possible within a customer service organization. Now, customer service is often that quiet group tucked away in the back of the building. Sometimes they don't have necessarily a seat at the exec table, and traditionally often thought of as a cost center within the organization. But what if, what if customer service could actually be thought of as a driver of profit rather than necessarily a drain on profit? And they can. So today what we're going to talk about is the use of automation and AI technology to move, customer service from the back room to the front and center of being a profit hero within the organization and driving incremental profit in unexpected ways. So we'll get more into that, but first let me introduce our two speakers today. So Mike McCarron is the VP of Sales at Gladly. He's been with Gladly for about 4.5 years, but what's interesting is he started as the VP of Customer Success. So every day he was in the trenches meeting with Gladly's customers as they came more to embrace this customer-centric approach. And today he's going to bring those insights about innovating in customer service to this discussion. And our other guest is Shail Gupta. He's a colleague of mine and our VP of Product and Alliances at Netomi. And he's close to a lot of the customers of our customers adopting the platform and also with working directly with partners like Gladly and coming up with the strategies that we use to introduce more AI into customer service organizations. So guys, welcome. I'm glad that we're finally having this conversation.
Thank you. Great. Thanks for having us, Gregory.
All right. So before we get to the meat of our topic, what I want you guys to do is paint a picture of the backdrop of customer expectations with which today's companies are dealing. And Mike, I know you've got a pulse on this topic because you're talking to your customers every day about the challenges that they have with their customers. So in terms of customer expectations, what are you seeing out there?
Gregory, it's a great question. I think, and obviously thank you for the opportunity to be able to join you guys today on this discussion. Certainly looking forward to it as well. I think when it comes to customer expectations, I think this is not going to come as a surprise to many folks that are attending today. But what's interesting about customer expectations is that consumers are essentially bringing the best customer service experience that they've ever had with any brand across any industry. Mm-hmm. And they're bringing those expectations to the interaction that they're having with every business that they do business with. And so no longer are consumers comparing one company against another inside of their industry vertical. They're comparing it against the likes of Amazon and Uber and Whole Foods and Netflix and any of these brands. Yeah. That's exactly right. The bar has been set super high, and consumers are now basically saying, if this company over here can deliver this kind of personalized service, why can't other brands do the same? And so they walk into every interaction with a brand with the best benchmark of a service experience in mind, and they want other brands to live up to those, right? And we've done a number of things over the last several years. We've done this great survey that we actually engage consumers with, and we basically say, what are your expectations as you engage in service? And a couple of really great facts and sort of data points that I'd like to share to start out with is first, consumers value personalized service more so. 80% of the consumers we talk to value personalized service more than they actually value personalized marketing. So getting a marketing campaign letter in the mail or an email is interesting to most consumers, but getting personalized service where they feel known and valued for who they are as a customer, they value that even more.
Yep.
One other data point that I think is really interesting is that we've asked customers, would you spend more money with a brand that delivers better service, even if you had to go out of your way? And 86% of the population said that they would do that. They would go out of their way to spend more money. So they're driving past the store that they value as delivering less valuable service, and they're going to drive farther down the road and spend more money with a brand that they actually feel like they're getting better service from. So service is valuable to consumers, and they look at that as part of the entire product and service experience. And I think that's especially important now where customer service representatives are oftentimes the only individual that is actually having a live conversation with a consumer, because many consumers have chosen not to go into the stores, but they've actually now chosen to do their business online via e-commerce, which I think is changing and shifting a lot of how companies think about personalized service at scale.
Okay, yeah, so the bar is definitely high. And I think we all experience that even in our own lives, our own expectations rise, even when we're in this industry. Shale, I want to turn to you. What, from your perspective, what is getting in the way of of organizations delivering this level of customer service that Mike's talking about?
Yeah, thanks, Gregory. And excellent points, Mike. I think a lot of the expectations create this pressure on organizations, right? And what amplifies this is when demand starts to soar. So there could be a few reasons, just how the company operates, but commonly what we've seen is just the spikes in demand for customer service can be a big pressure point. Now, spikes could happen for a variety of reasons. We all know about the planned and predictable ones, like or Thanksgiving or Black Friday type of season, but those are when you have enough time to plan and prepare and scale for capacity, right? So you can tackle those. But in situations like what we've seen over the last several months, you don't know things, and a lot of things that are unrelated to your business, like the pandemic, can have a significant impact on the pressure that a business sees from that consumer demand. So it could be because of a high demand for a product, or it could be because of demand just diminishing. So travel went down, but everyone was calling to cancel their flights or cancel their hotels. So regardless, it just put a lot of pressure on the customer service teams. And then, of course, there's also that flavor that's the welcome kind, right? Product takes off, company goes into hypergrowth mode. It's a demand that everyone welcomes, but at the same time, you need to be prepared for that. Now, when, a couple of things we've noticed in just looking at data, if you look at like e-commerce, just generally compared to 2019, demand has gone up like 32-ish% or so. And just over September, it's been, about 43% over. So you see this demand continue to grow. And I know, just speaking with Mike, I think last week he mentioned Crate and Barrel saw their e-commerce go up like 150%. Now, no matter what the reason, what tends to happen is higher pressure on customer service teams will ultimately result in some level of non-responsiveness or significantly delayed responses. And that's where you start treading into somewhat of that dangerous territory in terms of that relationship with the customer. So at Netomi, we also ran a bit of a research study to see how companies would respond. And surprisingly, in the retail sector, almost 70% of companies didn't even respond back to a simple return policy question sent via email. And in terms of the response time expectations, usually it's about an hour, but when companies did respond, it was like 36 times that. So a day and a half to respond to a simple email. And we also know that weekends tend to be low staffed. Right? And during weekends, that response time went up like almost 2.4 times. So when you put all of these things together, what are you putting at risk? So this delayed or non-responsiveness ultimately will create a loss of loyalty and diminishes customer satisfaction. So that's a real source for customer churn. And like Mike said, customers have the opportunity to drive down further and go to the place where they can get the value and the service that they're looking for. But it's not just about losing customers, it's also that profit opportunity. So if you can't intervene at the right time, help customers answer the right questions, and help complete that purchase, it's a lost profit or revenue opportunity as well. In fact, I think McKinsey did a survey, and what they found was that when companies prioritized customer service, they were able to increase revenue about 10 to 15%, and then also increase their win rates like 20 to 40%. So that's just customer churn, revenue side. But then also on the cost side, when you have to scale teams very quickly and without advance notice, you are going to start incurring a lot of cost on the operational side. And that is something that will directly impact the bottom line as well on the cost side.
Yeah, that's great. And I want to highlight one thing that you said, because you sort of went right by it because you had a lot to share, but Netomi did a survey of 1,000 companies and sent them a simple customer service inquiry, and 70% did not even respond, which was, it really to me was an astounding result. Okay, well, clearly non-responsiveness is a bad thing. I think everybody understands that. But it's really not just for the customer, right? There's impact on the internal teams. And Mike, you were going to comment on this one.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Shale was bringing up is really important in that when you think about the impact of an agent or a customer service hero that's engaging in sort of answering customers' questions, if they come across a question that's 3 days old or 2 days old, there's this inherent like feeling of like maybe it's too late and have I missed the opportunity? And that starts to sort of weigh on their sort of like their overall customer satisfaction or even their agent satisfaction. So one of the big things that we think about is how do you keep the employees that work in that customer service team, how do you keep them engaged? How do you keep them motivated? For them to be answering sort of these routine questions over and over and over again, and also to be put in a situation where the questions that they're being asked are 2 days old, they just have this inherent feeling of they're not keeping up and they're not keeping pace. And that's something that leads to burnout. It leads to agent or customer service rep churn. And as Shale just mentioned, the hiring process, the onboarding process, the knowledge that gets lost within an internal team when one of your seasoned customer service reps walks out the door is very impactful. And so that's a big hit to the effectiveness and the efficiency of a customer service team's overall productivity and efficiency. And that's something that consumers will eventually feel. They'll feel that because they won't have access to knowledgeable people who can help resolve their issues.
Exactly. And as somebody who's done a lot of ROI analyses within companies, like everything you mentioned is very hard to quantify. And so it's those costs they tend to go under the radar because they're so hard to quantify, but they are real. Okay. So we've talked about the backdrop of customer expectations. Let's turn our attention to automation and all the ways that it can help companies meet these expectations. Now, Mike, you and I we talked about 3 different ways that companies can deploy automation. So how about you shed some light for the audience here?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways. So like one of the things that we believe in, and this is something that we'll sort of like talk about towards the end of the conversation, but like automation is something that can help and should help deliver amazing customer service experiences. But what has to happen is you have to obviously use that automation experience at the right time, and you don't want it to feel sort of like impersonal, right? So you want to make sure that you do it properly. The ways in which customer service can leverage and take advantage of automation, there's lots of different ways, but a couple of ways is, first off, is being able to actually resolve issues fully automated where the customer service team never has to actually get engaged with the end consumer because the customer is asking a question that an automation solution can provide, whether it be order status or shipping status or return policy or whatever it happens to be. You want to be able to take those experiences or those scenarios where an automation solution such as Netomi can provide the answer that the customer wants, and they can do it in a timely fashion, they can do it quickly, and they can do it such that it frees up the customer service teams to answer the questions that do require that personalized human touch to do that. And so the idea that automation can help self-service, most consumers, when they come to a customer service scenario or a situation, they would love to solve the problem themselves. Like if they can find the answer themselves, they can get that answer when it's most convenient for them, and they can do it very, very quickly. And so the idea is to sort of like leverage automation to provide as much self-service and as much full automation service as you can for the appropriate kinds of questions that are coming in. So like for Shale's comment earlier, someone who's trying to like rebook a flight or change a flight or do whatever they're going to do requires probably a personalized touch. You don't want to try to automate something that shouldn't be automated, but you certainly want to automate the things that doesn't require a human touch or an individual person to be able to go and answer. So I think that's a really important part of leveraging automation to deliver great service, drive cost efficiency and savings, as well as deliver a great customer experience because they can do more self-service.
Right. Yeah. And so Shale, how does, maybe just a quick answer here, but this is your wheelhouse because AI actually can do that full automation that Mike is talking about.
Yeah, so fundamentally, the way we approach it is our foundational philosophy is that don't try to solve real world problems with hypothetical data, right? So you're not going to end up in a good spot. So the way we've created our approach, it's grounded in true historical data that our customers have seen. So when you look at historical data over a period of several months, look for seasonality, look for patterns, it helps you unpack what the actual customer service experience is
right.
the customer is seeing, right? And that's the important part. That's where our analysis is grounded in. Now, in doing this, what we found is that easily over 50% of the inquiries that are coming in fall into this bucket that are highly repeatable, not very complex, and you can apply automation to tackle it. But as you look into the details of the data and the devil's in the details, you'll find things that could be highly complex, require that personalized care or complex systems integration, or it's a level of thinking where you need interpretation of some type of policy manual or anything like that. So in those situations, it's not a great candidate for an AI or an automation solution, but that's why you have the human plus AI type of approach, and that's what we usually see works really well.
Got it. Okay, so you can fully automate a certain set of things and really take that load off of your team, but we know you can't automate everything. Sometimes things need a human touch. So Mike, what's the role of automation in those, I'll call them use cases or inquiry types that can't be fully automated?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting sort of like blend of leveraging automation to do things that are going to help deliver a more efficient and personalized service for the customer service agent who eventually gets connected with that customer. So information gathering, or the ability to essentially sort of ask the common questions or ask the routine questions that an agent would otherwise ask when they get that customer live. Could you ask those questions up front via an automation solution? So, order status and confirmation number, or some other kind of identifying information to make sure that when that customer is presented to that particular agent, the agent doesn't have to spend the first 30 to 45 seconds or even a minute or more gathering information from that customer about their issue, about their order, about their billing information, whatever it happens to be. Right. And so if you can gather that information up front, if you can put in place some automation that essentially gathers all the relevant details such that as soon as that customer service engages that customer, they have all the information that they need. They have all the backdrop and context information that they have to have to deliver a really efficient and effective service experience that allows them to provide that personalized touch, but do it in a way that takes into consideration the customer's time, right? You don't want to waste the customer's time by asking questions that they could have answered as part of the whole time or the wait time or sort of getting ready to actually engage that particular customer service agent. So I think that's a really important thing. And having that information available to that agent allows them to hit the ground running and say, okay, I understand. I'm talking to Gregory. I know everything I need to know about Gregory, and I'm going to deliver that really highly personalized service experience. And that's a win for both sides. It's a win on the efficiency, handle time, all the traditional metrics that a customer service team wants to have. And certainly it's a win for the consumer because they're able to get in and get out and get the problem solved very, very quickly.
Yeah, it's the best of both worlds. It's the automation for the mundane and the human touch to really create an authentic experience. Okay, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit just in terms of time, but Mike, I'm going to throw you a softball question, actually. Total softball. Why automation?
Well, I think there's lots of probably answers to that question. I think one answer to that question is that consumers like to self-serve. Consumers like to solve their problem. And so when you can put in place the information and give them access to solving the problem that they want to get solved, it helps the consumer. It meets them where they want to be, which is I want to be able to get my answers resolved whenever I have time. They want to leverage that automation self-service capability so they don't feel like they have to sort of like go through the full experience of a service resolution because they actually can get that answer on their own. I think that if I speak for myself or for others, like I think we all want to be able to solve problems as much as we can, certainly for those scenarios that are most advantageous to do that. And so I think automation allows for companies to give and provide alternatives to their customers to be able to resolve the issues that they want and for them to find the answers, whether it be knowledge or whether it be FAQs or even sort of doing some of the more advanced automation, which is finding out about order status or shipping status or things of that nature. Automation is a great solution when used in the proper scenarios to deliver the customer what they want in terms of the time frame and the outlet as far as how they're going to go get that issue resolved.
Okay, all right. And Shale, let me ask. It's a similar question, but kind of in a different way. How have you seen customer service managers pitching the benefits of automation to their exec teams in order to get funded for these projects?
Honestly, Gregory, I think that has shifted over time, and we're finding a lot more leaders are more receptive to it. But generally, if there is some resistance, usually a conversation that is along the lines of creating that best of breed human plus AI customer service team, right? I think that's the important concept here. Now, a lot of the benefits that we're talking about, and Mike pointed out, giving the ability to give time back to the agent so they can focus on high value personalized care. That immediately has an impact on your ability to retain customers, eliminate or drive down customer churn, and then really increase that customer lifetime value. Yeah. So when you talk in terms of customer lifetime value, I think that's something that resonates with a lot of leaders. The ability to maintain a stable customer service workforce, that's an important piece as well. I think a lot of operators recognize the overhead of onboarding, rehiring. That's a high cost associated with turnover. And as Mike pointed out, if you can make that job more interesting, that again directly has an impact on that line item as well. Yeah. That resonates as well. And then on the question of scale, right? So when you have AI as a buffer, the uncertainty around the spikes, you're able to adequately address that risk for a company.
Yeah.
So, just putting it all together, you end up with a customer service function that is optimized to be more resilient. It's just operationally more efficient. And then it's just better equipped to strengthen brand loyalty, which ultimately creates that longer or higher customer lifetime value.
Right. You go to sleep easier at night knowing that if there's a huge spike, you got it covered because the automation will really, in most cases, handle a big portion of that. Okay, guys, I'm just going to skip ahead a little bit. I want to keep our time focused on our case studies, which are coming up. So I'm actually going to launch a poll. So this is for everybody out in the audience. I'm going to launch this poll. So here's the question. What challenges might you anticipate when you're trying to sell customer service automation internally? I'm wondering what the points of resistance that you would think might come up based on what you know about your business. Okay, all right, everything's rolling in. I love this. So, okay, so we'll let this settle out a little bit. I'm seeing level of effort be one of the top ones here. Level of manual effort to set up. Yep, that's very understandable. And then worried about bots creating a bad CX. Okay, guys, we're going to ad lib a little bit. I want you to just quickly, because we want to fit everything in, quickly talk about the worry about bots having a bad CX. Mike, you had a comment on this, but
I did. Yeah, it looks like there's actually a question that came in as far as the Q&A from the attendees as well, which is that same experience, which I think is a great topic. And I think that here's how I think about bots and creating a bad CX. So first of all, if you don't have any automation at all, and you find yourself 2 to 3 days behind your customer service responsiveness, that's a bad CX, full stop, right? So like very, very clear, a lack of ability to sort of keep up with the pace of issues with customers that are bringing, to the customer service team. That's a really poor customer service experience. So that is the foundation, sort of is the bottom point here. Let's just sort of level set on that. I think when you think about adding automation, the effectiveness of automation and the way in which you want to leverage automation is to take those things that can and should be automated and provide that as self-service for your customers so that those questions and those issues can get resolved such that it frees up the customer service team that requires the personalized touch to engage customers in only those kinds of scenarios that they're able to handle. Free those individuals up. Those are very valuable and costly and effective sort of resources within your team. Free them up to handle the kinds of questions that only they can, and remove from their list of work items or list of issues, remove all the items that a machine or an automation solution can handle. Yeah. You're going to essentially get the best of both worlds, which is you're automating the things that can and should be automated, and you're personalizing the touch of experiences from a service standpoint that should be personalized. And so when you leverage automation correctly and in a proper way, you're actually improving the customer service experience on both ends, because you're getting self-service and you're freeing up resources and capacity to do the right thing on the higher touch service.
Yeah, and what both you and Shale have said are there are sets of customer inquiries that are absolutely repeatable and absolutely automatable. I think that might be a new word, but and create a good customer experience. Shale, this is right in Netomi's wheelhouse, because we do pride ourselves on natural language understanding that actually really does understand human language. Do you just want to comment for a minute before we move on to the joint solution?
Yeah, and thanks, Gregory. You know, if you look at the highly effective customer service teams, you'll find that they tend to be very collaborative in nature, right? And the conversation tends to be unified. So even if you've had a conversation with one customer service agent, and if you ended up having to speak to the other, if there's a continuity of that conversation, that's a big part of that overall experience. Now, when you do introduce automation in the mix, sure, right? You know, I don't think a machine can have as much of the human-like experience, but with advanced NLU and how much we've progressed, I know particularly at Netomi, we invest a lot in that technology. You get to something that is quite close, but we're not necessarily trying to fake being a human being, right? The idea is still to position the AI as an AI, but position the AI as a peer to the human agent operating in the same environment. So just in the context of like how we're working with Gladly, the Netomi agent is kind of a virtual knowledge worker sitting inside that same environment. And in that model, the additional benefit you get is the risk associated with, you know, AI perhaps, you know, not being able to take care of certain things. That safety valve is right there, because AI has the way to easily and seamlessly hand over and escalate within the same context. You know, just like a human agent would bring in her supervisor if needed, that's what the AI is doing in that environment. And that's kind of like the beauty of the approach here, is to eliminate that risk and then still have good AI that can have reasonable conversation.
Yeah. So I'd say to anybody that voted for that answer on the poll, I invite you to get a demo, and we can actually run you through and show you the power of the AI and its ability to recognize human language. Also, we can take your historical data, as Shale said earlier, we can actually run on it and tell you beforehand in about an hour or two what general percentage of your customer service inquiries are actually automatable. So there's really no risk, because you're going to see that up front. Okay, let's keep moving, guys. If we could skip forward to the next slide about the joint solution. So Mike, we wanted to just have a moment for you to talk about the Netomi and Gladly partnership.
Yeah, I think it's I think if we go one more slide here too, we can actually show the visual of what this is. So I think, you know, a picture here speaks 1,000 words. And I think what we've been talking about is, again, how do you blend that automated experience with a personalized high touch experience? And the idea between both the Gladly team and the Netomi team is to find ways to introduce automation in a very natural way, in a very sort of like customer sort of friendly way. And the idea is, again, allow for the consumer to do as much self-service or as much sort of the resolution of their problem within that automation solution up front, but then very seamlessly transition, if they need to, from an automated self-service experience to an assisted service experience where you're bringing in a live agent to be able to engage. And the idea here is, this is a screenshot of the Gladly UI that has the ability to integrate with Netomi and allows for the automation solution to become part of the ongoing lifetime conversation that a brand has with a particular customer regarding an issue. And so in this case, you can see there's some back and forth between individuals on a sort of a chat sort of messaging solution where they start out by doing a self-service experience, which is then transitioned over to a live agent experience. And the important part is that we don't compartmentalize or silo the automation dialogue and the automation conversation from the actual live conversation with the agent. So the idea here is that whatever's happening within that automation experience should be presented to the agent in such a way that it's very natural, so that when you do introduce that person to engage in that particular customer's issue, they're not asking the questions that have already been answered. by the customer in that automation experience. And so the idea is to very seamlessly move that back and forth. And what Gladly and Netomi have done is we've leveraged both APIs and capabilities on both sides to stitch that conversation together in a single view, such that the consumer experience, they might know, as Shell mentioned, they might know that they're talking to an automation or a bot, but they also recognize that when they engage with that live person, they're actually sort of like the knowledge and the insight and the answers that were sort of gathered as part of that sort of like that partial automation solution, you know, that we talked about. It's not full automation, but in this case, it's actually a partial where they gather some information, hand it over to an agent. The agent doesn't have to sort of tell the customer, can you retell your story? Can you recap what happened in the automation experience? That's super frustrating for customers. They don't want to have to do that. And Gladly and Netomi have built a really elegant solution that brings everything together such that that agent can see exactly what's going on in a moment's notice.
And Mike, what was it that had Gladly want to initiate with Netomi?
Well, I mean, we were seeing and finding that, you know, there were so many of our customers were asking about automation. They were asking about sort of AI and the ability to sort of handle the different kinds of scenarios that were coming up. And I think that, you know, chatbot is just one form of automation. Obviously, there's lots of different forms of automation. And with Gladly having all of the digital channels as well as voice channels built natively into one platform, our ability to sort of find a partner like Netomi who could allow us to do automation across messaging and chat and other digital channels down the line gives us flexibility to say, if you're engaging over, you know, a social media channel or text messaging or some other sort of digital messaging platform, the ability for an automation solution like Netomi to seamlessly integrate with Gladly provides both the customer as well as the agents that are working in Gladly really ultimate flexibility for how and when that automation solution is integrated into the holistic service experience that they're having with the brand.
Yeah, that is, we get a lot of that feedback that the fact that we cover social, chat, and email, which is more rare, allows our partners and our customers a lot more flexibility in terms of how they engage with their customers. Okay, again, I have my eye on the time, so I want to move us forward. We want to go into the case study section. So for those in the audience, I think this is the most interesting part because we're going to actually talk about specific customers that used automation for their benefits. So let's see, the first one is WestJet. And so going back to talk about spikes in business, Shell, you talked about this before. And WestJet is an airline in Canada, and they experienced a huge COVID spike when it just came out. I think you were going to talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and honestly, you know, even before the COVID spike, their AI powered by Netomi was already handling about 74% of all of the inquiries coming in without any human intervention, right? And so when the pandemic did hit, obviously phones were ringing off the hooks, and this is where that non-responsiveness really becomes a high risk, right? And when you have hours and hours of wait time involved, you know, honestly, there's no human way to solve this problem that quickly. And so AI is that elastic ability, or AI gives you that elasticity, if you will, to scale that in the manner that we were able to do. So it peaked, you know, 87-ish%. And even while the phones were backlogged, a lot of people just ended up coming back to the messenger channel to get things taken care of. So while, you know, the negative experience of what happened, it's really hard to mitigate that. But if you can soften the blow by virtue of helping customers take care of some of these things fairly easily, you have a shot at managing the downside for your CSAT.
Yeah. And Shell, I think you're being very modest about this because that 87%, let's, you know, shoot some fireworks off with that. 87%, I mean, can you imagine automating 87% of your customer service inquiries successfully? Obviously, these aren't just deflecting them off and giving them substandard answers. This is full resolution. 87% is actually the highest published rate in the industry. And this is a reflection of the power of the AI, the sophistication of the natural language understanding in the Netomi solution. It's something the company invests heavily in and has a lot of pride in because you see it manifested in customer situations like this where they hit a huge spike and we're able to really offload, you know, over, you know, I mean, really we're talking offloading 87% of that load. Okay. So that's probably the most straightforward use of automation, where you're using it to reduce the volume of tickets. And that's going to give everybody faster answers. It's going to lead to a greater CSAT score, which you saw on the slide happened for WestJet, 24% increase in their own CSAT. And that is a huge feather in the cap of the customer service manager that drove that project. They're going to get credit for that. They're going to have the opportunity to claim even more credit, because the higher the CSAT goes, that means you've got happier customers who stick around, and that leads to lower churn and revenue and higher revenue retention, which is really the focus of every sales team. It's churn and revenue retention of existing customers. And that's a little bit more sexy than just saying, hey, we reduced our ticket backlog by 15%. It's more sexy when you can talk about and claim wins in the space of churn and revenue retention. Okay, Mike, you've got an example here, and it's sort of in that same vein of do more with less. So I'll let you talk about the JOANN stores example.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to the last slide, as well as this slide goes back to that earlier quote that we mentioned, which was that 86% of the population will go out of their way to spend more money with a brand that delivers great service. And so if you keep customers engaged, if you sort of help them resolve issues more quickly, it's a revenue boost to the company. It's sort of a profit driver, as we were talking about earlier on in the conversation. Like, the ability for customers to come back and want to spend more, to want to do business again with that brand, is a big part of the customer service team's role and responsibility. And we're starting to see companies move away from viewing their customer service team purely as a cost center, as a transactional sort of like case management sort of team, and much more into a revenue generation and a relationship, proactive sort of relationships team that's engaging with customers to help them resolve their issues. And I think with JOANN's great example is, like, they had, when we first started working with them, the backlog of issues, the backlog of challenges or concerns that customers were bringing to their attention was growing and growing, and they were sort of having a tough time sort of getting that under control. And it was because they had these disparate systems that were siloing different interactions with different channels, and they weren't able to view and see the customer as a person. They were seeing that customer's interaction as opposed, in the form of tickets and cases. And by taking the concept of ticket-based or case-based service and putting that to the side and saying Gladly can help us focus on who is this individual customer and all the communications that they've ever had with that brand in one lifetime of conversation that you saw in that screenshot, it allowed for agents to engage that customer in a much more efficient way. It brought their email reply time and their backlog down from days to hours. And they're able to help more customers with the same or fewer staff members, because they're not having to chase down and to try to find all these disparate interactions or these different sort of interactions that a customer is having. And that, again, helps the customer service team by getting a win, because they're basically bringing down their time to resolution, their time to getting back to customers to a much shorter time frame. But imagine the benefit from a positive experience perspective on the customer, where they don't have to wait days to get an answer to a basic question. And so the idea is, how do you scale? How do you give your team? And I think everybody who's on this call who owns a customer service organization knows that budgets are not unlimited. You can't hire indefinitely in terms of the people you want to bring on your team. So you have to figure out, how do you do as much as you can with the people that you have? And by sort of leveraging automation and also leveraging a single view of that customer across all channels is a really important and impactful thing for brands to start to think about, because they can't indefinitely hire, especially with an unknown sort of capacity or unknown spike of traffic. There's no way to accurately predict what's going to come. So you have to put into place the ability for the team to have some flexibility by leveraging automation, as well as just leveraging more efficiency on the customer service team side, as far as looking at all the different interactions that a customer is having with the brand.
Yeah, and what I pulled out from what you said was, you don't have to scale the headcount of the customer service team with the top line growth, and that's going to lead to greater profitability over time. Okay, I was going to go to the next one. I do want to say, hey, everybody out there participating, go to the Q&A. It's down at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and go ahead and submit questions. We'll do Q&A. We're almost done. We'll do a Q&A in a few minutes, but if you can submit them now, then they'll be queued up and we can answer them one by one. But continuing on while everybody does enter those questions, Mike, you were also going to talk about Tory Burch? Because it's not just doing more with less, but it's like, how do you use this automation and full information picture to really sell more to the same set of customers?
I think this is really an extension of that sort of cost center to revenue center theme that we've been talking about. And that is, how do you empower agents that when they do engage with that customer, or in this case, the client specialist that are the stylists that work for the Tory Burch team, how do you let them engage that customer in ways that allows them to feel comfortable and confident selling either additional product, cross-selling, upselling, or turning what is traditionally a sort of transactional, sort of reactive service experience, which is, I'd like to return this pair of shoes, or I'd like to return this handbag. And how do you turn that return into an opportunity to sell more items? So great example that we oftentimes talk about with the folks over at Tory Burch is very, very early on in the deployment of Gladly, what we found is we were presenting information to the client specialist, which is their sort of agent team. We were presenting them with information that they really never had access to, which was buying behavior, purchase history, and even some product spend distribution, if you will. Where is this consumer spending the majority of their money within the Tory Burch brand? Was it on shoes or handbags or ready to wear or dresses? And turns out that it was a customer who spent quite a bit of money on shoes who was returning a pair of shoes. Mm-hmm. And so in the absence of knowing that this was a high dollar shoe buyer, that customer service, client specialist would have processed the return, wished the customer well, and gone on their way and sort of gone after the next sort of like issue that was coming in. But they took the time to recognize that this person has spent a good amount of money with Tory Burch on shoes and asked what they didn't like about the shoes and could they offer them an alternative. They ended up selling 3 more pairs of shoes to that customer. So they turned what normally would be a very transactional, reactive, issue or situation into a cross-sell, upsell opportunity. And the way they were able to do that is twofold. One is provide the information that customer service agent needed to understand who this customer was, but also give them the space and the capacity to have that kind of in-depth, meaningful conversation versus looking at average handle time and saying, I've got to get off the phone, I've got to get off this chat because I've got a backlog of all these issues I got to go take care of. So working with that team really sort of highlighted the power of spending some of that time to personalize that experience, because that personalized touch drives the revenue.
Okay, great. So I'm just keeping an eye on the time. I see some questions coming in. I'm going to go to our last case study. So Shiel, what we've been talking so far is, a customer service inquiry comes in, then we use automation to address that. But there's some more forward-looking ways to use automation where it's not just the inquiry that kicks it off, but maybe some other proactive signal. And I'll let you speak to that, but you have a great example from one of our customers, HP.
Yeah, certainly, Gregory. And this is kind of like the additional model of providing care to your customers, right? It falls under the umbrella of proactive care. And it goes well beyond your simple reminder emails that tell you to, continue a subscription or something like that. This is more about introducing an experience at the right time with the right value, and also eliminating any friction points in getting to the outcome, which in this case is completing a purchase. So in the example of HP, you've got smart printers that are hooked up to the cloud. And sure, the printer can tell you when you're running low on ink, but how many of us remember, what specific cartridge or ink cartridge is compatible, right? You've got to go and figure that out every single time. But what if the printer, via Netomi, is actually able to have a conversation with you, let you know that you're not just running low on ink, but hey, here's what you ordered last time. And by the way, here are some additional options. So perhaps it's a larger size cartridge, which is kind of like your upsell opportunity, or perhaps it's additional products like printing paper or other supplies, so cross-sell opportunities. So making this whole experience more conversational, introducing it at the right time, and then providing a path to getting to that outcome, which is completing the purchase pretty easily, with the added opportunity of that upsell and cross-sell, really allows you to have a really low cost of sale, but then also drive incremental revenue from a model like this, while of course taking care of the customer.
Right. That's, and I mean, the enormity of that only sort of dawns slowly, but you actually reaching out to customers in an intelligent way and selling to them without a human having to do anything, or at least not initially. And so you're right, low cost of sales and that use of automation. Okay, Mike, I'm going to skip the last case study because I do need to keep an eye on the time. I'm going to run a quick poll, everybody. I'd love to hear your input. So here it comes. What would be your primary motivation for looking at or implementing customer service automation? I'm really curious as to what the motivations out there would. I didn't put in all of the above option, but hopefully you'll pick the ones that work for you. Okay, scale the CS team with cost efficiency. Currently the runaway leader. That's interesting. Okay, I'll give it another second for a few more to come in, but this one's clear as to what at least the audience is thinking here. Go ahead and get those last poll results in. I'm about to end it, folks. Okay, so let me share the results. So you can see that there. Far and away, you guys are looking at this so that you can do more with less because you're not able to scale the team. As Mike said, you don't have endless budget that you're being given as much as you need it. You're not getting it. Okay, very interesting. So the last thing that I'll do before we go to the Q&A is just, I'm going to say this. This is a little bit of a softball to you guys. If you would like a demo from either company or both companies, and you may or may not, but if you do, go ahead and actually just register that in the poll because we know who answered.
Oh, looks like Gregory's internet may have paused there.
Didn't know if that was me or not, Shail. That's good that you're still live there. I think maybe as a follow-on to this, we'd love to, I think what Gregory was saying was like, we'd love to sort of follow up with anybody who is interested in learning a little bit more about both the Gladly and the Netomi solutions, as well as the combined sort of solution in terms of automation. And maybe as as a closing thought here, there's also a couple of questions that came in, but maybe as a closing thought, one of the things that I would like to just maybe sort of summarize as part of the conversation is that, automation and self-service and this idea of radically personal service or high touch personalized service don't need to be sort of viewed as being at odds with one another, meaning like you're sacrificing one in exchange for the other. Because I think what we're starting to see is that customers and companies that embrace both automation and they embrace this idea of a very highly personalized, high touch service, those two philosophies can and likely should coexist within an organization. Because if you have this backlog of issues or this backlog of customers that you can't help and you can't be responsive and you can't sort of address their issues quickly, then no amount of personalized service, if you're waiting 3 or 4 days to get back to that customer, is really going to make a difference, right? So what you want to be able to do is balance the things that can be automated and the things that can't or shouldn't be, and knowing the difference of which is which, and ensuring that the technology and the people and the process and infrastructure that you put in place is well suited to address that particular scenario, where in some companies it might be that you automate 10% or 50% or 75%. It really depends on each business, but knowing that automation and self-service as part of an automation sort of strategy can really help free up those valuable resources that are individuals to be able to do that. And Cheryl, I don't know if there's any concluding thoughts there. There was a question about sort of like AI and self-learning, and how does that self-learning bot sort of find a way to sort of learn, especially if the automation solution sort of transitions that question over to a live agent. If they're doing that, is there a way to sort of like circle back and allow that engine to sort of like essentially learn from the things that it wasn't able to answer the first time so they can answer it a second time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And self-learning sounds like a great idea, but in practice, it tends to go south fairly quickly when it just learns the wrong things, and you end up with a model that is kind of corrupt, right? And that's the state you don't want to end up in. Now, our philosophy at Netomi is that the AI has visibility into more or less everything, and the notion of supervised learning, where you allow humans to actually introduce or really control what the bot should be learning. And in many cases, it's also important to peel back the layer and really understand, is it a understanding issue, or is it, an issue that, well, a bot should just not touch in any event, right? So separate the two. And if it's really just an understanding issue, which is more of an AI training concept, then we, at least on our side, provide the tooling that allows you to very easily train the AI on the new knowledge areas. So just like, using COVID as an example, right? It was an unknown word when it first popped up, but as it streamed through the system very easily, all of the questions that were tagged with that were used to seed and train the AI, and in a matter of a couple of hours, the AI knew how to respond to those, right? But it does, I think supervised learning is an important concept to keep in mind as you do this, because it does give you the ability to protect your brand, protect your messaging, and make sure that you're not just putting something out in the wild without the adequate controls. And that's the key thing, adequate controls with the right people, so you don't introduce brand risk.
Got it. Perfect. Gregory, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's all good. Yeah, welcome back.
A million people on Zoom, and sometimes some of us get kicked off. So thank you for taking over. There was a question earlier about, hey, how do you make AI an authentic experience? How are you sure it's not off just saying silly things? And forgive me, I missed part of what you guys addressed, but is there any part of that you want to address still, Shale?
Yeah, so I think the historical conversations is an important, analyzing the historical conversations is an important part of this. And when you train the AI, one core underpinnings of our process here at Netomi is also setting the tone of your AI, right? The messaging, the style. And that's something that, we don't just create independently. We use best practices, but it is a collaborative approach with the brands that we work with. The bot should be able to speak and have a conversation in the style and tone that reflects your brand. So it's not just about, auto generation of text, which, in some cases may work, but, usually it is about aligning the conversation with the style that the brand is looking for.
Yeah, and true understanding. Like you said, it's not just this auto response, it's true understanding of what the actual person is thinking. And I want to point to, you got to say the proof is in the pudding. Yeah. And I want to point to that 87% mark. You don't resolve 87% of inquiries unless you have a really smart AI brain that's actually truly understanding. So I think that's the best proof, is empirically we can do that. And again, 87% is not just a deflection rate of, we send you to an article and then you kind of go away. We actually fully resolved each of those. Okay. There was a question, and it was also reflected in the polls, about too much manual effort to set up. And one of the things that I'll throw in, and then I'll let either of you guys comment, is, I know from a Netomi standpoint, we automate a lot of the hard things. So we actually take your historical data out of your agent desk, and we can actually process that and train on that. And so really the moment you turn it on, you can hit the ground running. And we've had customers up and running as fast as 10 days. It can be that straightforward to just get you up and running. And then we build new capabilities over time. But our ability to, for instance, use that historical data and train on it, and the fact that we've got a white glove team that really just walks you through all this, it's actually very easy in a lot of cases. Doesn't mean there's no effort, because we have to partner with you, but it actually can be rather straightforward. And Mike, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about ease of use with Gladly, because I know it's very easy to get started.
Yeah, I think that, with Gladly, there's a lot of different ways to think about sort of deployment or rollout or onboarding with Gladly. We have, small sort of like, fast growing companies that can be up and running in a matter of days. We also have large enterprises that have really complex and, multi-channel sort of service groups that even within a couple of weeks, they can get up and running and be operational in terms of getting Gladly to their agents and serving their customers across all those channels. And so there's a variety of different ways to do it. Obviously, the way we think about most service deployments or most engagements is to think about sort of that crawl, walk, and run approach, which is, what do you need to do up front to get the infrastructure, the systems, the training, and the onboarding done properly. And then you start to layer on top more complexity or more channels or even more geographic regions based on what the business needs require. So, certainly happy to get into more details there. But we certainly see a variety of different kinds of implementation approaches based on size, complexity, and the kinds of channels or services or even automation that a customer wants to introduce.
Okay, great. Well, I know that people usually need a break before they go to the next meeting. And so I'm going to mercifully end our conversation. Guys, this has been great. I hope that you've enjoyed it as much as I have. And for the participants, I hope that you've gotten something out of this. Again, if you'd like to get a demo, please do reach out on the email addresses that were provided earlier. And gentlemen, anything else to add before we sign off?
Just a quick thank you for everyone. Thank you to Mike and the Gladly team. And any questions that we're not able to answer, we'll certainly follow up with the response. I know there's one that popped up, so maybe I'll address that real quick. Is there a benchmark to determine whether or not automation is beneficial for your specific support org? Is it as simple as 15% of tickets deflected or resolved? So honestly, there is no one number, right? It depends on how big your team size is, what the volume is, what the cost per ticket is, but that's purely a cost savings lens, right? And I know a lot of the audience had mentioned that doing more with less is a big part of it, but if you put all of those numbers in, there is some math that's very easy to determine the automation value that you can get. But the bigger picture remains is that what is the increased CSAT, increased responsiveness, what is the customer lifetime value, what is the agent satisfaction value that it adds to the organization long term. Those are things I think should always be factored in as a part of the bigger strategy. Otherwise, you'd be quite short-sighted.
Great. All right, everybody. I think that's enough for today. Thanks so much for your attention and participation, and be well.
Great. Thank you all. Appreciate it.